What happens when a corrupt cop pulls over the wrong man, thinking he's just another easy target? Officer Daniels thought he held all the power until the man in the driver's seat revealed who he really was. Now the hunter is about to become the hunted. The highway stretched ahead, empty and quiet. A black luxury sedan glided down the road, its engine a soft hum against the still night. Inside, Agent Michael Carter exhaled slowly, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. It had been a long day. Meetings, security briefings, endless paperwork. Now he was finally heading home. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed 12:37 a.m. The road was deserted except for a single police cruiser sitting on the shoulder. Dark, silent, watching. Michael barely paid it any mind. He wasn't speeding. No reason to be concerned. Then, flashing red and blue lights filled his rearview mirror. Michael frowned. His grip on the wheel tightened slightly. What the hell? He glanced at the speedometer. Exactly the limit. No broken taillight, no swerving. So why was he being pulled over? A deep sigh. He already knew the answer. Keeping his movements slow and deliberate, Michael signaled and pulled to the side of the road. The cruiser followed, stopping a few feet behind him. Michael turned off the engine, placed both hands on the wheel, and sat perfectly still. He knew how these things could go. Footsteps, crunching gravel. He checked the side mirror. Two officers, one approaching with an air of arrogance, hand resting near his holster. The other hesitated a few steps back, unsure. Michael didn't like the vibe. This wasn't just a routine stop. The aggressive one reached the driver's side, mid-40s, stocky, building a face that had seen too many years of unchecked authority. License and registration. His tone was flat, cold, no introduction, no reason given. Michael kept his voice calm. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" A slow smirk curled on the man's lips. "Step out of the vehicle." Michael's instincts kicked in. This was wrong. "Is there a reason for this stop?" His tone remained polite but firm. The officer leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing. "Your car matches the description of a stolen vehicle." A lie. Clear, deliberate. Michael had been in dangerous situations before. He had protected presidents, stopped assassination attempts, walked through war zones. Yet this was different, because here, on a dark highway, there were no cameras, no witnesses, just him and two men who already decided how this would go. He exhaled slowly. Stay calm. Stay in control. Without another word, Michael unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Michael stepped out of the car, moving slow, controlled, calculated. His hands stayed visible. He knew the rules. The night air was crisp, but tension thickened it like smoke. The highway remained deserted, just endless asphalt stretching into darkness. No witnesses, no cameras, just him and them. Officer Daniels stood in front of him now, hands still resting on his gun. Stocky, building cold, piercing eyes, a smirk that hinted at bad intentions. Behind him, the second officer, Reed, hovered near the cruiser. Nervous, hesitant, but silent. Michael took in the details instantly. Daniels was in charge. Reed was just along for the ride. Daniels took a step forward, chest puffed out. "Turn around, hands on the hood." Michael didn't move. "Are you going to tell me why I was pulled over?" His voice was calm, measured. Daniels' smirk widened. "I already told you. Your car matches a stolen vehicle." Michael's jaw tightened slightly. Another lie. He had driven this car for years. A government-issued vehicle. Plates clean. Registered directly to him. No way it was flagged. Daniels cocked his head. "You got a problem with that?" Michael exhaled slowly. "Patience. Keep control." "I'd just like to know why I'm being treated like a suspect," he said, his tone even. Daniels chuckled, low and mocking. "Funny thing about questions?" He leaned in slightly. "People who ask too many tend to get answers they don't like." Michael's fingers twitched slightly. A warning, a threat, a challenge. But he had nothing to prove to this man. He turned around and placed his hands on the hood. Daniel stepped closer, his breath hot against the back of Michael's neck. "You carrying anything illegal, big guy?" Daniel sneered. Michael kept his voice level. "No." Daniels ran his hands roughly over Michael's shoulders, then down his back. The pat-down was unnecessary, aggressive, an intimidation tactic. Michael clenched his jaw. He had been in war zones. He had faced snipers, bomb threats, assassins. And yet this power trip, filled him with a different kind of anger. Reed shifted uncomfortably. His voice finally broke the silence. "Daniels, maybe we should..." Daniels cut him off with a glare. "Shut up!" Michael didn't miss it. The hesitation in Reed's stance, the doubt in his voice. But doubt wasn't enough. Daniels continued the unnecessary search, his hands dipping into Michael's pockets. Then he froze. Michael felt it. The wallet, the badge inside. Daniels pulled it out, but he hadn't seen the credentials yet. Instead, his attention landed on the cash. A few crisp $100 bills. Daniels let out a low chuckle. Well, well, he muttered, thumbing through the money. Looks like you're caring. Michael exhaled, his patience razor-thin now. Daniels looked up, smirking. And then, the real game began. Daniels grinned, holding up the cash like a prize. Mocking. Testing. Well now, he drawled, flipping through the bills. Seems like someone's doing well for himself. Michael's hands stayed on the hood, his heartbeat steady, his breathing controlled. But his patience? It was wearing thin. I don't consent to a search, Michael said evenly. Daniels chuckled. Oh, and what are you going to do about it? He leaned in close, his voice lowering. See, I don't like your attitude. And out here, my word is the only one that matters. Michael didn't move, didn't react. Let him talk. Let him dig his own grave. Behind them, Reed shuffled awkwardly, glancing down the highway. No cars, no headlights, no backup. Daniels, Reed muttered. Maybe we should have... Shut up, Reed, Daniels snapped, not taking his eyes off Michael. Michael caught the hesitation in Reed's body language. Doubt. Fear. He wasn't fully on board with this. That meant something. Daniels stuffed the cash into his pocket, then patted Michael's chest roughly. Where you headed, big guy? Home, Michael said. Daniels scoffed. Fancy car. Nice suit. Flashing $100 bills. Who exactly do you work for? Michael didn't answer. Daniel's smirk twitched. He wanted a reaction. Needed one. Michael wouldn't give him that. You a dealer? Daniels pressed. Hustler? Maybe you're one of those Wall Street crooks. That it? Nothing. Daniels exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You don't talk much, do you? Michael let the silence stretch. Daniels' expression hardened. Fine. Have it your way. He took a step back. His hand went to his belt. Step. Outside. Now. Michael barely kept his irritation in check. I already am. Daniel's smirk vanished. Then put your hands behind your back. Michael turned his head slightly. Am I under arrest? Daniel's fingers twitched near his holster. Do it. Michael exhaled through his nose. He had options. He could comply. Let it play out. Let Daniels dig himself deeper. Or he could end this right now. But that wasn't the play, not yet. Michael moved slowly, bringing his hands behind his back. Daniels reached for his cuffs but hesitated, because deep down, he knew something wasn't right. Michael wasn't afraid. Good boy, Daniels muttered. He gripped Michael's arm roughly, pressing him against the car hood. Michael let him, for now. Reed stood off to the side, shifting uncomfortably. Daniels, maybe we should call this in. Daniels shot him a glare. For what? You scared? Reed swallowed hard. No, you just nothing. Daniels cut in. Stay in your lane. Reed hesitated. His fingers flexed at his sides. He knew this was wrong. Michael studied him from the corner of his eye. That crack in loyalty, it might be useful later. Daniels patted him down again, rougher this time, his hands shoved into Michael's coat pockets. Then he found it. Not the badge. Not yet. But Michael's wallet. Daniels pulled it out, flipping it open. His smirk widened. Well, well, look at that. Michael remained silent. Daniels pulled out more cash, letting the bills flutter slightly between his fingers. A game. A test. Reed's breath hitched. Daniels, what are you? Daniels ignored him. His smirk sharpened. You know, he said, voice dripping with fake generosity. Maybe we can just settle this right here. Michael's eyes darkened. There it was. Daniels wasn't just looking for a power trip. Michael stayed quiet, watching him. Daniels tapped the stack of bills against his palm. I mean, you'd rather handle this quick and easy, right? Michael's voice was calm, too calm. Are you asking for a bribe, officer? Daniel's smirk didn't waver. I'm saying we can work something out. Reed took a step back, shaking his head. Daniels, this is... Daniels shot him a look, a warning. Michael didn't move, didn't blink. But now it wasn't just patience holding him still. It was calculation. Because Daniels had no idea who he was dealing with, and he was about to find out. Daniels smirked, flicking through the crisp $100 bills like they meant nothing. Like Michael meant nothing. Easy way or hard way, Daniels muttered. Your choice. Michael didn't respond, didn't flinch. He had faced warlords, terrorists, professional assassins. This man? He was just another thug in uniform. Daniels sighed, shaking his head. Come on, man. You don't really want to spend the night in county, do you? He tapped the cash against his palm. So let's make this simple. Michael's voice was ice. That's extortion. Daniels let out a short, amused laugh. Is that what we're calling it? Reed shifted uncomfortably near the police cruiser. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Daniels stepped closer. His breath reeked of coffee and arrogance. Listen, big guy. I could say I smelled something funny in your car. Call K9. Drag this out for hours. He tilted his head. Or you drop a little goodwill my way, and we forget this ever happened. Michael stared at him, silent, calculating. Daniel's smirk twitched. He didn't like that Michael wasn't afraid. Michael knew exactly what was happening. A game of power. Daniels expected him to fold, expected fear. But Michael had dealt with far worse than men like him. Daniels licked his lips. Clock's ticking. Michael exhaled slowly. You sure you want to do this? The smirk faltered, just slightly. Daniels recovered fast. Do what? He sneered. Ain't nobody here but us. And my word, it's law. Michael's jaw tensed. He had given the man a chance. He could end it here. Could reach forward, disarm him in less than a second. Break him. But Daniels wasn't his mission. Michael had a bigger lesson to teach. He moved slowly, reaching for his inside pocket. Daniel's gun was out in a flash. Don't move! Michael froze, controlled, unshaken. His voice remained even. I'm reaching for my identification. Daniel's finger twitched on the trigger, his breathing uneven. He wanted control, but deep down he knew he had already lost it. Michael kept his movements slow. No sudden jerks, no aggression. He pulled out the leather case, flicking it open with one hand. The golden badge glinted under the streetlights. Silence. Reed's face drained of color. Daniels didn't move, didn't breathe. Michael stared him down, waiting. Finally, Daniels blinked. His smirk was gone. His hand trembled slightly on the gun. Michael's voice was calm, cold. Final Daniels didn't move. His eyes darted between the badge and Michael's face, his grip still tight on the gun. He was processing, panicking. Reed took a shaky step forward. Daniels, put the gun down. Daniels ignored him. His jaw clenched. His fingers twitched. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. You think this changes anything? Daniels spat. His voice was shaky, his confidence slipping. Michael didn't blink. It changes everything. Daniel's smirk returned, but this time it was forced, desperate. Secret Service, huh? He tilted his head. So what? You're off duty. Out here, you're just another guy in a suit. His finger hovered over the trigger. And guess what? I don't see anyone here to stop me. Reed took another step back, his face pale. He wanted no part of this. Michael's heartbeat slowed. Not fear, just calculation. He had stared down the barrels of enemy rifles, heard the click of safeties unlocking in war zones. Daniel's gun didn't scare him. Michael exhaled, measured, controlled. Then he took a step forward. Daniels flinched. Don't you move! Michael didn't stop. Another step. Daniel's hands trembled. His mask was cracking. He had never faced someone who didn't fear him. Michael's voice was quiet but firm. You sure you want to do this? Daniels let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. I can make this real bad for you, Daniels hissed. One report, one resisting arrest charge. You know how these things go. Michael took another step. Daniels stiffened. Michael's voice dropped lower. sharper. The question is, Daniels, his gaze locked onto the gun. Are you willing to bet your career on it? Silence. The red and blue lights flashed around them, painting the night in a surreal glow. The weight of the moment pressed down, thick and suffocating. Reed's voice was barely a whisper. Daniels, put it down. Daniels' breathing was uneven, his hands slick with sweat. He had lost control and he knew it. Then sirens, faint, distant, getting closer. Daniels' eyes widened slightly. Someone had called backup. Michael held his stare, unmoving, unshaken. Last chance, Michael said. You either put that gun away, or you live to regret it. Daniel's face twisted. Rage, humiliation, fear. The sirens grew louder. Daniel's breathing quickened. Trapped, cornered. Then, he made his choice. His hand dropped. The gun lowered. Michael didn't move, didn't relax. Not yet. Daniel swallowed hard. You think this is over? Michael's lips curled into the faintest smirk. No, Daniels, it's just getting started. The sirens wailed through the night. Justice was coming, and Daniels knew it. The sirens grew louder, closer. Daniel's hands were still shaking. His grip on the gun had loosened, but not enough. Not yet. Michael stayed still, his badge still out, still waiting. Reed finally snapped out of his daze. Daniels, put the damn gun away. Daniels didn't move. His eyes flickered between Michael, the badge, and the approaching sirens. He was trapped, and he knew it. Michael's voice was quiet but firm. You understand what happens now, right? Daniel's lips curled in anger. You don't get to talk down to me. Michael lifted the badge slightly. You pulled over the wrong guy. Reed let out a shaky breath. Oh, my God. His face had lost all color. He looked sick. Daniels wasn't done. His pride wouldn't let him stop. This doesn't mean anything, he stammered. I had reason to stop you. Michael arched an eyebrow. Did you? Daniels opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Michael took a slow step forward, just enough to make Daniels flinch. A small reminder of who had the real power here. The flashing lights reflected off Michael's badge as he held it up fully now. Secret Service. Federal authority. The color drained from Daniel's face. The realization finally hit him. Michael saw it all. The fear, the regret, the desperate scramble for an excuse. Daniels took a step back, trying to regain control. Look, we can handle this. No need to report it. Michael tilted his head. The audacity. You tried to extort me. His voice was cool even, deadly. Daniels scoffed, but the confidence was gone. It was a misunderstanding. Michael smirked. Oh, I understood perfectly. The sirens screeched to a halt. Red and blue lights exploded across the scene. Doors slammed. Multiple. Daniel stiffened. Backup had arrived. Michael didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge them yet. This moment wasn't over. Reed stepped forward, his voice cracking. Daniels, we're done. Daniels clenched his jaw. His whole body was tense. Michael leaned in slightly. One last push. You thought you could do whatever you wanted. He let the words settle. You thought nobody would stop you. Daniels didn't respond. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Michael's voice dropped lower, sharper. You were wrong. The sound of approaching footsteps filled the air. The other officers were here. Daniel's hand twitched. One final second of hesitation. Then, he lowered the gun completely. Michael didn't move, didn't blink. The tables had turned. Daniels wasn't the one in control anymore. Michael was, and Daniels knew it. Daniels' hand trembled as he finally lowered the gun. But it was too late. The damage was done. The flashing lights bathed everything in red and blue. More officers, more witnesses, more trouble. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked around, searching for an escape. There wasn't one. Michael hadn't moved. He didn't need to. The situation was unfolding exactly how he knew it would. A uniformed sergeant stepped forward, his voice sharp. What the hell is going on here? Daniels snapped his head toward him. Sarge, this isn't what it looks like. Michael let out a quiet chuckle. Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like. Daniels whirled back to face him. His eyes burned with anger, humiliation. Shut up. Michael tilted his head, calm as ever, unbothered, unshaken. Make me. Daniels clenched his fists. His whole body was rigid, barely holding it together. Reed took a step forward, his voice unsteady. Sarge, I don't know how this got out of hand. The sergeant narrowed his eyes. Out of hand? I have a federal agent standing here at gunpoint, and you're telling me this got out of hand? Daniel scoffed, shaking his head. His mask was cracking. He was resisting. Michael's eyebrow lifted. Resisting? Daniels pointed a shaky finger at him. Yeah, you were acting suspicious. You refused to cooperate. Michael smirked. You mean when I asked why I was pulled over? Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Michael turned to the sergeant. Cool, composed. I complied with every request. I stepped out when asked. I kept my hands visible. He lifted his badge slightly. Then he illegally searched me, tried to steal my money, and when I wouldn't play along, he pulled a gun on me. Silence. The sergeant's expression darkened. Daniel's breathing turned ragged, panic settling in. That's not what happened, he snapped. He's twisting this. Michael's eyes locked onto him, sharp, dangerous. You know what's funny, Daniels? Michael's voice was smooth, laced with something deadly. This car has a dash cam, audio and video. Daniels froze. His face went pale. The blood drained right out of him. Reed stiffened. What? Michael nodded toward the sedan. Government issued, records everything. He let that sink in before adding, and I never turned it off. Daniel's lips parted. He was done. He knew it. Reed knew it. The sergeant knew it. The sergeant let out a slow exhale, rubbing his temple. Tell me this is a joke. Michael didn't smile. You think I'm laughing? Daniels broke. Come on, man, I wasn't serious. His voice was higher now, desperate. It was a test. I wanted to see if you were legit. Michael arched an eyebrow. So the extortion was a test? The gun to my face? That was part of the lesson? Daniel's hands shook. It's not like that. Michael cut him off. Then what's it like? Daniel stammered. He had nothing. Michael didn't break eye contact, didn't let him breathe. He took a step closer. Daniels flinched. Michael's voice dropped. Lethal. You thought I was just another black man you could shake down. Daniels inhaled sharply. That's not true. Michael tilted his head. No? He let the silence stretch. Then why me, Daniels? Daniels' face contorted. Anger, shame, guilt. He had no answer. Michael leaned in slightly, just enough to make Daniel sweat. Your career is over. Daniel's breath hitched. His fingers twitched at his side. He looked at the sergeant, then Reed, begging for an out. There wasn't one. Sirens wailed in the distance. More backup. IA, maybe. The real endgame. Daniels took one last shuddering breath, his voice barely a whisper. We can fix this. Michael smirked. No, Daniels, we can't. The walls were closing in, and Daniels had nowhere left to run. Daniels' chest rose and fell rapidly. His world was crumbling, and he knew it. The red and blue lights painted his face in flashes of color. A man caught, a man exposed. Michael stood still, watching him unravel. Calm, collected, in control. A radio crackled. More officers were arriving. Daniel swallowed hard, desperation creeping in. Listen, he said, voice low, urgent. We don't have to do this. Michael's gaze didn't waver. Do what, Daniels? Daniels licked his lips, sweating now. We can work something out. You're a federal agent, right? You know how this game works. Michael let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but colder. This isn't a game, he said. Not for me. Daniels clenched his fists. I'm just saying, you don't need to ruin my career over a misunderstanding. Michael tilted his head. A misunderstanding? Daniels nodded quickly, grasping for anything. Yeah, I was messing around. It got out of hand. Michael's smirk was slow, deliberate, dangerous. You pulled a gun on a federal agent, he said. That's not messing around. Daniel's nostrils flared. I was doing my job. Michael stepped forward, just enough to make Daniel shift back. Your job? Michael's voice was razor sharp. Shaking people down, taking bribes, abusing your badge. That's your job? Daniels said nothing. His hands twitched. He was cornered. Reed finally spoke up, his voice unsteady. Sarge, you hear all that? The sergeant sighed, rubbing his face. He had heard enough. Yeah, he muttered. I heard it. Daniels spun to face him. Sarge, come on. I've been on this force for 15 years. The sergeant's expression was stone. Then you should have known better. Daniels looked between them. Michael, Reed, the sergeant. No allies left. No exits. Michael took out his phone and dialed. Daniels' breath hitched. Yeah, Michael said into the receiver. I need a unit at my location. Officer involved in extortion, assault, and abuse of power. Daniels snapped. His hand shot forward, grabbing Michael's arm. You can't do this. Big mistake. Michael twisted fast. One fluid motion, precise and brutal. Daniels yelped as his wrist was bent backward, his knees buckling under the pressure. Michael leaned in, voice cold. You're done! Sirens howled. Tires screeched. Backup had arrived. Daniels let out a shaky breath as Michael released him. He staggered, clutching his wrist. Reed stepped away. I can't be part of this. His voice broke. I should have stopped it. Michael looked at him, then back at Daniels. You're both guilty, he said. The only difference is, one of you just realized it. Daniels had nothing left. His power was gone. His authority shattered. Daniels stood frozen, trapped, defeated. The sirens screamed in his ears. His time was up. Michael watched as two officers stepped forward. No hesitation, no sympathy. Officer Daniels, the sergeant said, his voice hard as steel. You're under arrest for extortion, unlawful use of a firearm, and abuse of power. Daniels' face twisted. Anger, fear, humiliation. This is bull... The sergeant cut him off. Turn around, hands behind your back. Daniels' mouth opened. A final plea. A last attempt at control, but there was nothing left to say. One officer grabbed his arm. Daniels flinched. The other clicked the cuffs tight around his wrists. Too tight. Daniels sucked in a breath, eyes darting to Michael. Desperate now. Come on, man, he rasped. You don't have to do this. Michael's expression didn't change. No pity, no forgiveness. You did this to yourself. Daniels knew it was true. The officers pulled him toward the cruiser. His feet dragged. His shoulders slumped. The moment he used to control, now controlled him. Michael shifted his gaze to Reed, the last loose end. Reed stood stiff, hands clenched at his sides, regret written all over his face. I didn't stop him, Reed murmured. That makes me guilty too. Michael didn't blink. Yes, it does. Reed exhaled, his whole body deflating. Then he reached up and removed his badge. He placed it on the hood of the squad car. Silent. Final. The sergeant nodded. We'll take it from here. Michael gave one last look at Daniels, now slumped in the back of the police car. A man who thought he was untouchable. Not anymore. Daniels met his gaze through the window. His face was pale. His lips pressed into a thin line. He finally understood. Michael turned away. This was over. But the lesson? That would last forever. Weeks later, Daniels sat in a courtroom, handcuffed, hollow-eyed, a shell of the man he once was. Michael watched from the back, silent, unmoving. The judge's voice rang clear. 8 years in federal prison. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Daniels flinched but said nothing. He had no fight left. Michael had seen men break before, some in interrogation rooms, some in combat. Daniels broke here, because this wasn't just about the sentence. It was about losing everything. His badge, his authority, his power, gone. Reed sat nearby, shoulders hunched. A broken man, but not a lost one. He had taken a plea deal, cooperated, told the truth. It cost him his badge, but not his freedom. Daniels wasn't so lucky. The gavel slammed. Final, absolute. Court was adjourned. Daniels was led away. His eyes flicked toward Michael, searching. For what? Mercy? Understanding? A second chance? Michael gave him nothing, just the truth. You did this to yourself. Daniels looked away. Michael's name wasn't in the headlines. He preferred it that way. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't about revenge. It was about doing what was right. A week later, he sat across from his director. "You made a lot of enemies with this one," the man said. "You know that, right?" Michael smirked, unbothered. "Nothing new," the director sighed. "And if something like this happens again?" Michael's answer was immediate. "Then I'll handle it again." The director studied him, then nodded. Michael stood, adjusting his suit. His job wasn't over. It never would be. Because men like Daniels, there would always be more, and someone had to stop them. Michael Carter would always be that man. Justice wasn't a choice. It was a duty, and he would never walk away from it.